Welcome to the Football Debates Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Debates. In this episode, I'm going to talk about how I watch a typical game, whether it's a college game on a Saturday or an NFL game on a Sunday. I'm going to talk to you about what I'm seeing when the offense and defense line up, what happens when an offensive player goes in motion and how the defense reacts, and what I'm looking for when a play develops. Hopefully, some of the ideas I present here today can enhance your enjoyment when you're watching a game of your favorite team. Some of the other things we're going to talk about briefly are offensive players going in motion and how the defense will react to them. I'm going to talk about how I like to watch certain players or position groups during the course of the game, seeing what they're doing, how the play-by-play announcer and the analyst of a game, how they can give you ideas of what players to watch or certain things to watch for during the course of the game. And we're going to break down a typical college play, what I was seeing as it happened live, and what happened as the play developed. When you're watching a typical game, everyone sees the same thing. We see what the camera shows us. On a typical pass play, the center snaps the ball back to the quarterback, he drops back to pass, and he throws the ball downfield to a receiver. And we can see all that because we're following the ball. As a former line coach, I prefer to watch the offensive and defensive lines because they can tell you exactly what's going to happen on any particular play. I watch them because they're in the camera shot also on every play. The receivers oftentimes on a pass play, as the camera pans back to follow the quarterback, the receivers go out of the camera shot. The running backs end up out of the camera shot. On a run play, the receivers can disappear and so can the quarterback off the screen because as the running back runs with the football, oftentimes the cameraman will focus in on the running back and zoom in a little bit more. So as you're watching a game, you can always see the offensive and defensive linemen, and they'll show you exactly what's happening. For example, if it's a typical running play, the offensive line will attack and move forward. If it's a pass play, they'll back up because they're not allowed to go downfield on a pass play. They'll back up, get a firm foundation and a good base to try to prevent the defensive line from attacking and getting to the quarterback. Conversely, the defensive line, once they read that it's a run play, they will try to hold their ground and then get into the gaps between the offensive and defensive linemen to try to make the tackle. Or once they read it's a pass, they will try to get upfield and try to sack the quarterback. And by watching the offensive and defensive lines, since they're in the camera shot on every play, you can pick up different techniques, little nuances, and sometimes you can even see what's going to happen as a play develops. For example, if it's a running play and the running back is going through the hole, maybe it'll be a big gain or a touchdown, maybe he'll get stopped for no gain or a loss of yardage. So as that hole develops, maybe there'll be a defensive player there, maybe not, or sometimes a defensive player will seemingly come in out of nowhere and make the tackle. If it's a pass play, as a quarterback drops back to pass, you can still see the offensive and defensive linemen. Sometimes you can see a blitzer come through free and get to the quarterback. Sometimes you can see a defensive line stunt. As mentioned in a previous episode, I talked about a tackle end stunt where a defensive tackle gets upfield, the defensive end loops around, and you can see that as it happens. Another good indicator of watching the offensive line and what happens on a play is if you see an offensive lineman facing the wrong direction, oftentimes that's the offensive lineman that missed his block and his player made the tackle. Football Hall of Fame coach Vince Lombardi said, "Football is blocking and tackling. Everything else is mythology." It's another reason why I like to watch the lines, is everything that happens in the play, especially the blocking, starts with the offensive line and whether or not they can make their blocks, whether or not they can keep the defensive line out, and what the defensive line can do back to them. Oftentimes you'll see, if you're focused on the line, a linebacker blitzing or a safety blitzing, getting through and making the tackle behind the line of scrimmage. Sometimes you can see penalties as they happen. Sometimes you can read a little bit about what's going to happen with the play by focusing on the offensive and defensive lines. Now, I also like to watch receivers and defensive backs also, but since they disappear from the camera shot, you can't always see them. This is one way television is great, and the play-by-play announcer and the analyst on a game can help you out and enhance your viewing enjoyment. After a play is over, oftentimes they'll show a replay. If it's a big name receiver or an important player, they'll have a camera focused on him. And as the play develops, when they're showing the replay, the analyst will talk about what they're seeing on the play, and hopefully you can pick up what they're saying and maybe see some other aspects of the play too that maybe the analyst doesn't see or doesn't mention. At the start of this video, I also mentioned how I like to watch various position groups. I like to watch the offensive and defensive line, but I also mentioned that I like to watch certain players. I'll watch players because of my familiarity with them. Sometimes I've seen them a lot in college and they make it to the NFL. Sometimes they're small college players that get to the NFL and I like to watch what they're doing. For example, if I'm watching the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they have the ball, I'm generally watching their right guard, Mason McCormick. He played at South Dakota State University, which is near where I grew up. He was drafted by Pittsburgh and immediately became the starting right guard. So I'll watch him during the course of the game. Oftentimes I'll see, whether he makes a block or doesn't make a block, whether it's a run or pass, and I'll get to see what's going on with the play while I can still focus on him. This past year's Super Bowl, there were two groups that I focused on when I was watching the game. Going into the game, New England Patriots versus Seattle Seahawks, the New England starting left side of their offensive line was manned by two rookies, a rookie left guard and a rookie left tackle. And it was often mentioned by the announcers whether or not they would be able to hold up against the fierce Seattle defense. So when New England had the ball, I focused on them to see what would happen during the course of a play. When Seattle had the ball, I focused on their left guard quite a bit, Gray Zabel, who grew up in South Dakota and played for North Dakota State University. Small school player, but he's considered one of the best offensive linemen in his draft, was a first-round draft pick, and played quite well, not just throughout the year, but in the Super Bowl also. So sometimes I'll watch players like that to see what they're doing during the course of a play. And if you're watching the offensive lineman, or defensive lineman, you can tell whether or not the play is a run or a pass right away. When I'm watching college games, I'll focus on players that I get to see quite a bit because their teams are successful. They're on television a lot. One player that I like to watch, don't understand why, but I do enjoy watching him play, is the tight end for Georgia, Oscar Dell. He's probably going to be drafted this year and will start his NFL career. But I like how he plays his game, how he runs certain routes, how he can block, and how he does various things during the course of his game. He's not necessarily a first-round draft pick, but I enjoy watching him play. There are two running backs from Penn State, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Their games are very similar, but they are slightly different. But I enjoy watching both of them play, whether they're running the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield, or blocking. Whatever they're doing, I get to enjoy watching them play. Sometimes I'll focus on a player that the announcers mention, whether it's a starter who's just back from injury. Sometimes it's a backup player who is in place of the starter, whether it's an offensive or defensive line, whether it's a defensive back, a linebacker, backup quarterback, whatever it might be. The TV announcer and the analyst will oftentimes talk about those players, and then you can focus on those players during the course of the game, and you can see how it develops, how the play develops, and what those players are due during the course of a play. As I mentioned before, motion plays a big aspect in the course of a game, and there are different types of motions that offenses will run that can help reveal what the defense is doing. On the chart, you can see different types of motion. You have a receiver running all the way across the formation. You have a tight end running out at the start of a play. You have a running back starting in the backfield and going out. There's another motion where you have a receiver coming in the motion and going behind the quarterback and running back, which is called orbit motion. And sometimes you'll have a tight end start up just off the line of scrimmage at a wing position and then back up into the backfield like a running back. All of these motions have significance. What they're trying to do is get the defense to shift, maybe cause confusion. So that way it'll reveal to the quarterback whether the defense is in a man coverage or a zone coverage and maybe who is covering what receiver, which can give the offense an advantage. Another motion that I don't have on here, but has become very common in the NFL today, is when a running back starts out wide by the sideline. How the defense reacts to that receiver is a good indicator of whether they are in man or zone coverage. If the running back is out wide and there's a linebacker that goes with him, then that generally means that's going to be man coverage, and that gives the offense that tell. If the linebacker just bumps out to the receiver and there's a defensive back out there with that running back, that's usually zone coverage. And that tells a quarterback maybe to throw the ball to the other side of the field or to a different receiver or maybe change the play. Oftentimes then you'll see the running back come back into the backfield. Once the offense has that tell, whether it's a man or a zone coverage, the running back will go back into the backfield and maybe do his assignment that was described for the play, but he just lined up out wide to try to force the defense to show their hand. Oftentimes, though, a defense will change the call or sometimes make a dummy call to adjust to what the offense is doing. So those are just a few different types of motions. And then how the defense reacts will tell you or give you a hint at least as whether it's a man coverage, zone coverage, or whatever it might be. And seeing what defensive players are lined up on what offensive players can be a good indication also. Because you generally don't want a linebacker who's 6'4", 250 pounds covering a 6'4", 210-pound wide receiver who is considerably faster. That's not a good man-to-man matchup. So if you see that alignment, oftentimes that's a good indicator that that's going to be a zone coverage. So those are some of the things that you can see as you're watching a game, how the offense reacts, how the defense reacts, seeing how a play develops. And those are all just different aspects of what's going on in that course of the game. Now I'm going to break down a typical play from a recent college football game to give you an understanding of what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing when I watch a game. You can find this highlight on YouTube. It usually is at about the midpoint of any YouTube video because this play happens just before halftime. This is from the Alabama-Oklahoma college football playoff game this past season. The situation is Oklahoma has the ball at approximately their own 45, 46-yard line. There's about a minute and a half left in the first half, and Oklahoma has 3 timeouts. They're facing a second long situation, and so they lined up in a spread set. Wide receiver on the near side on the line of scrimmage, tight end on the near side in a wing position just off the offensive tackle's hip, wide receiver on the opposite hash off the line of scrimmage, and a wide receiver on the far side of the field at the top of the screen on the line of scrimmage. Alabama is countering with 8 men on the line of scrimmage and 3 defensive backs all aligned approximately 7 to 10 yards off the ball to give an indication that they may be blitzing and these defensive backs are playing man-to-man coverage. What drew my attention was shortly before the ball was snapped, there's a safety from Alabama on the near side that sprints away from the line of scrimmage and ends up actually going out of the camera shot. As a former defensive coach, this to me is an indication that this player is playing a deep half or a deep third coverage, and my attention was immediately drawn to the corner on the near side of the field. With the safety behind him, this corner does not have to worry about getting beat deep. If he's playing man-to-man coverage, he can be a little bit more aggressive, playing that wide receiver, or if he's playing zone, he can focus on his short zone area and not have to worry about the receiver going behind him because that's where the safety is at. As the ball is snapped, Alabama does confuse Oklahoma a little bit. Instead of rushing the remaining 7 players at the line of scrimmage, Alabama only rushes 3, the 2 defensive ends and the nose tackle. They all attack upfield in the pass rush. The remaining 4 players all drop back into various zone coverages. One linebacker even appears to rush and then drops back right behind the nose tackle and appears to be spying the quarterback or watching the quarterback to tackle him in case he runs. As the play develops, the Oklahoma quarterback drops back. He immediately takes his eyes to the near side of the field, looking for the receiver that was split out wide. The receiver apparently reads the coverage correctly, or he's running his route. He's going beyond the corner to get into the space behind the corner and in front of that safety on the near side. Apparently the Oklahoma quarterback doesn't read this correctly, or he doesn't see the defensive back on the near side of the field. As the play develops, the corner moves from his original alignment, moves forward about 4 or 5 yards right onto the 50-yard line. In fact, I believe he's standing right on the number 50 as the Oklahoma quarterback throws a pass. The Alabama corner then intercepts it and returns it for a touchdown. And as he's returning it, you can hear the announcers say that they fooled him or they confused the Oklahoma quarterback into throwing that pass. But that's just some of the indications or some of the things that I look at when I'm watching a game. As that safety from Alabama ran out, my attention was drawn to the corner on the near side because I knew that he didn't have to go deep. I also started watching the offensive and defensive lines to see who else was rushing, because if that safety ran back deep, with my experience, I understood that they weren't probably going to blitz the other 7 remaining players. Maybe 3, 4, maybe even 5 other Alabama players would have rushed, but there would have been some dropping back into coverage. And as you can see on the diagram, You can see how I have that, the various Alabama players dropping back into coverage, the one player dropping back behind the nose tackle, spying the quarterback. So these are all indicators that you can look for too when you're watching games. And you can practice to develop these skills. Think about your favorite team. They probably have highlight videos on YouTube. You can go back and watch a game where you know the outcome of the game. You can watch individual plays from that game and break them down, rewind them and rewatch them, and watch different aspects of each play. Watch the offensive and defensive lines on the play. What is the quarterback doing on the play? What are the receivers doing on the play? What are the defensive players doing on the play? And you can break that all down to learn how to look for different aspects of a play. Once you've done that and feel you have a good understanding of that, you can go and watch highlights of other teams. See what they are doing. See how they are making their adjustments when a player goes in motion, and see if you can figure out what is going on in that particular highlight before it happens. Maybe you figure out that a pass is going to be intercepted and returned for a touchdown, or maybe you figure out that the defensive back is going to mistime it, the receiver catches the ball and goes for a touchdown. So these are things that you can practice, and hopefully some skills that you can develop before your favorite team starts their new season. So that way you can pick up on some of those nuances and get a little bit better of an experience watching the game and hopefully enjoy the game a little bit more. Thank you for watching the Football Debates podcast. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you next time.